welcome to all of you who've managed to get online. And this really comes with a hugely warm welcome. And what we're creating tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about how this process was birthed, as well as an intro into our amazing co-presenters who are with us here this evening. And they're going to give you a brief overview of their life-defining epiphany moment with you. We'll be talking about what the process is not, as well as what it exactly is, and what creates an epiphany moment. You'll hear people saying, what is it, or asking, what is an epiphany moment? Or people who do know the epiphany process saying, wow, that epiphany moment is and most especially, we want to make this evening as organic as possible for you. And the team and I will be very especially opening the forum up to you for your input and questions as well. So let's get going. First of all, to intro me, I don't suppose I need to intro too much as to why I'm here on all that side. Most of you know that I came across the epiphany in my most darkest hour, but I thought I'd give you a bit of a backstory. I used to be a motivational speaker, and I was pretty good at it, and people would go away very, very often, amazing things, and I was in sales. And then I noticed that people would come back and say, we need another dose of Janetta or another fix. We need you to fix us, Janetta. And I'd go, those are drug words. And it used to really bother me. It was like, what is the missing in that? And of course, that was because they were going away artificially, having taken my energy, used it, lost out, used it all up, and then coming back for another dose of energy. And I realized that was misleading. It wasn't authentic. So I took myself away for a good many years and started working on the intuitive side of my life. I sat with people working and expanding my intuition, and never really looked back, and found that it was becoming more and more fine-honed. We're all intuitive. It's not a closed club. But so what happened was people then started coming to me to gain insight from my intuition, and I began to go, that's still inauthentic. It's still not working because they're still not doing it for themselves. They're relying on me. And round about the time that I was querying that, Jenny, my third child, my eldest daughter, was going through, well, it had been a long period, 3 or 4 years of severe depression. And at the time that we lost Jenny in 2005, I was really severely questioning my work. And in the months that followed after her death, I just wondered how I was going to survive, let alone sort out this worry and concern that I was not being authentic. When 9 months, prophetically 9 months after Jen died, I came across the basics of this process, the very, very basics, which is really the scientific form of yin and yang. It's the yin and yang in scientific language. And sometimes when I'm speaking the epiphany stuff, I sound like I'm a Buddhist. And there's no variation. It's the same stuff in 2 different languages. And it's amazing how it crosses over all the time and starts getting deeply spiritual. The people who are deeply spiritual hear spiritual speak when we use the process. And the people who are in their logic and scientific brain hear science. So it's the most wonderfully adaptive process to use with anyone and everyone. So that gives you an idea of how it was born. But first of all, I thought I would before going more into that, I would introduce you to the team. So first of all, Larissa, you're first on here. Can you unmute and introduce yourself and explain to everybody about your epiphany journey and your aha moment with epiphany?
As I was growing up, I always had a very heavy, sinking, sad, horrible feeling. I didn't really understand why. I always felt horrendous and really battled with my mind. And this caused me to actually want to take my life. I didn't want to be here. I was then introduced to Janetta through a friend who suggested I give it a go. So I went, not really expecting much. And I learnt the Epiphany process, which has taught me how to keep my emotions in balance, and how feeling negative in life is just as valuable as constantly always trying to be positive. And my biggest aha moment was when I felt relief at I wasn't strange having negative thoughts, and I wanted to stay and live on earth and make a career for myself, as well as I used to have a huge issue with social media, and everything I saw on social media used to really affect me and my self-confidence. Another moment was when that no longer bothers me, and I'm now happy with who I am and what I look like, and yeah.
Okay.
That's me.
That's you. Okay, and Riss, I'd be safe in saying that your very first session, after having done many different types of processes, what happened that first day you left the session and got in the car? What happened?
I felt a huge sense of relief that I was, it sounds strange, but that I was normal to feel negative, because for so long I thought feeling negative, like there was a huge issue. Why do I always feel like this? So relief that you told me I was okay. I was not some strange human that always felt negative, and that you were going to show me the true value of it.
I think the wonderful thing that even in the first session, can you hear how Larissa took ownership in that? But actually, it was even deeper ownership, because she worked out that she was normal through what happened. So I didn't sit there and say, oh no, you're normal, because people telling you that, you go, yeah, right, I believe that, like a hole in the head. But when you actually work it through on a conscious and an unconscious level, which is what the process does, then you start taking ownership. And that's what you felt after the first session, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you, Riss. We'll go on to Toya. Larissa, by the way, is in Nairobi. Toya is in Norway.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria, and I met Neta actually through a very, very, very good friend, and she was doing the Epiphany. At that time, she was helping a lot of well, when we talked about the Epiphany, she was helping a lot of people from the Westgate attack. So in Nairobi, there was a terrorist attack a few years ago in a shopping mall. And I was interested, because I work in the medical field, I was interested in how the process worked, because I work with a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists. And I thought it was really interesting, and that it really talked to me. So I myself, I'm a war survivor, and it took 19 years for me to finally be able to work on a childhood trauma. And I actually was, we were attacked, and my mom and my little sister lost their life. And I was there as well, and I was shot as well. And I never really had any post-traumatic and disorder or anything like that. But of course, it's something that I think as kids, you kind of learn to live with it in certain ways. But yeah. So what happened is 19 years later, I kind of relived the whole event, and it was terrible. And so I thought I either see a psychologist, because it's not really fun to go through that, or why not contact Netta and see what the Epiphany offers. And in 1 hour, we were able to process so many things that I literally never looked back. I did many sessions with her, and then I studied the Epiphany, and I became, I qualified as an Epiphany consultant. And I was able to really understand how that marking event in my life was a traumatic event and was negative in many ways, but it is as well was positive in many ways, and it actually made the person that I am today. It's influenced my life in many ways and still does. I was able to learn that being vulnerable is something that we tend to perceive as something very negative, and it's a feeling of shame. But with the process, I managed to learn that it was actually a strength as well. And that has helped me tremendously in many ways. So that was, I would say, the biggest first aha moment. The second biggest aha moment was, I need to share it because I find it really important, was when we worked on values and what are your biggest values in life. And I remember so I was studying and I was just in a blank in front of that paper, what are my biggest values? And as Janetta is really good at pushing you to do it, I learned what were my biggest values in life. And that has been a life-changing thing, like completely life-changing, because I realized how there were decisions that I was making in my life, really big decisions that were guided by my life values, but I was not conscious of them. So there was an internal fight all the time, wanting, like there was this feeling that was guiding me, and then there was a part of me that was rational about it, and it was always fighting because I was just not conscious of it. And once I became conscious of what were my life values, then I was able to actually understand why I took those decisions and actually pretty much live my life in a completely different meaning. It was fulfilling. And since then, I cannot stop practicing. I think I do it every day. It's helped me in being a mother. I had 2 kids in different countries, and in 2 countries where I was very lonely, where I had no family. I didn't have any friends. And when you go through that extremely vulnerable and special and intense moment, and you have no one to share it with apart from your husband, but he's going through the same thing than you are, and you have this new life that you're feeling so responsible for, and it's just been such a special, it's been so special to be able to have the process with me since then.
Okay, thanks, Toya. That's great. Thank you. All right, Jenny, welcome.
Thank you. So,
Jenny's a very special part of what I do because she has my daughter's name, and yeah, that's amazing. So Jenny, in a few sentences, if you can explain how you got into Epiphany and your aha moment.
I got into Epiphany because I had a deep sadness about a loss of one of my babies, or 2 babies, I should say. And I met Janetta walking in the forest. with a friend of ours, and we started talking, and she had such an open manner and such a welcoming manner, and we touched briefly on a few things, and she asked me if I wanted to have a session, and I think literally the next day I called her, and I had my first hour, and in that hour just really started to get to grips with my feelings, which also then comes to what one of my biggest aha moments was, and a lot of it is actually just being able to be in touch with my feelings and the way I act and react to things. So I used to actually, my way of getting things done and to get my way is by being aggressive. It was very successful. You know, I got to be CEO of the company. I moved up the corporate ladder very quickly, but it wasn't satisfying. And I was reactive and impulsive, and I hurt a lot of others on the way. And I wasn't really aware of that. And through Epiphany, I got to be really aware of the impact I have. Now I take the time to listen, to understand, empathize, and more than anything, really hear what other people have to say. And without a doubt, I mean, absolutely without a doubt, I'm a much better friend. I'm a much better colleague. I'm definitely a much better mother. And I'm a much better leader. I actually, you know, I take the time to value everyone's contribution. I'm able to give clear and honest feedback without causing others to get upset, which is just huge for me. So I think I really value myself. I value those around me. I no longer lash out in anger, and this allows me to have the empathy and love for others, which just, it just allows open-heartedness and love into my life, and then that flows out as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenny. George, welcome.
Hey, I'm George. I'm a Greek South African, and I'm teaching English in China. I've known Janetta for about 15 years. And I've been involved with the Epiphany process now for the past 18 months, or since the beginning of last year. I'm busy qualifying as a consultant, busy with that. And for me, I have had many Epiphany moments while training and recently with Janetta when I did a process, and one of the most significant ones were the most recent one, where I was able to recognize and accept and understand where my anger comes from, and as a result, I'm now no longer angry with noisy and unruly people. I just accept them and am more tolerant with them. There was another biggie a bit earlier on, sometime last year, that I used to have irritable bowel, and that was because I thought I was eating the wrong foods. And what I did discover was it wasn't so much the food I was eating, but stressing about what I was going to eat. And that stress and worrying about the food that made me sick was actually what was making me sick, not the food itself. So those are the two biggies that I've had so far, and still working and enjoying the process.
George, just to finish off with you, the
Yeah.
anger side, you didn't realize your levels of anger till you started doing this, because I mean, you've been a great meditator and deeply spiritual person, correct?
Yeah. another thing I'd like to mention now that you've reminded me is that I have been working on myself as seeking new ways to improve myself for around about the same time that I met you, around about the same amount of time. I used to come to your workshops back there in Pietermaritzburg in South Africa, and I have explored and practiced so many different things and modalities, read many books, educated myself on the internet, did meditations and all sorts of courses, and nothing has been as effective and as helped as much as the Epiphany process.
Yeah, that I so agree, because before I came across the basics, which is, as I mentioned earlier, scientific, I was always going, there's a missing. And in the 14 years I've been working the process, there's no missing. It's so accurate on the dial, because at the end of the day, it is scientific. And so that's what makes it so accurate. So
I also want to say that the Epiphany process is not only for people who have had traumatic experiences and very difficult backgrounds. It's for everybody. It's for everybody who's ready they've come to a point in life where they feel ready to master themselves.
excellent. Yeah, it's from people with day-to-day challenges right through to the extreme. And although by way, my niche is trauma and grief and so on, I'm able to work with absolutely anybody and everybody as a practitioner, because the questions are the same questions. It doesn't matter what you're going through. So thank you for that add, George.
Okay.
Okay,
Right.
Lisa.
Yes, I've in my childhood, I would describe as both toxic emotionally and mentally, a lot of emotional abuse, and my coping mechanism to deal with that was to shut down. I found it very difficult to express myself and speak to others, and but I was a people pleaser. I avoided conflict. When I had my children, they brought a real light into my life, and in having them, it was the first time I'd really felt like I could do something. Because before that, I don't know, I probably spent 20 years trying to help myself with my low moods and to help myself be more able to express myself. My children became unwell about 6 years ago, 3 of them at once, and my world pretty much collapsed. And I sought a lot of natural alternatives and, again, meditation, yoga, to try and help me deal with the overwhelming anxiety that I was going through. A lot of the natural treatments that I accessed helped my children, which helped somewhat, but at the same time I still felt myself completely falling apart, to the point where my anxiety and my overwhelm meant most days I wished I wasn't alive. And at that point, a friend suggested I talk to Janetta. And I really struggled initially in being able to even access answers to the questions she posed for me. A lot of it around the lockdown that I had on my emotions and expression. My biggest moment was when I addressed my persisting wish to end my life, and in being able to really go there and look at why I wish to end my life and what benefit I would gain from that myself, what benefit I thought my children would gain from it. It enabled me to release it, and I haven't actually had that wish since. And that was, I'm not sure, maybe 6 months ago. I've been working with Janetta for about 18 months now, and I've had it started the ball rolling in a really major way. It opened me up, made me able to express myself and access memories and emotions that I had really locked down. It also gave me techniques that I was really able to help my children with. A lot of their effects had been neurological, and my eldest had really, well, when he was at his sickest, he lost his verbal skills altogether. He lost his voice. And he has had some sessions with Janetta, and
He's 11
again,
years old, just to
yeah. He's was able to the first session with Janetta and him, he wasn't able to say anything initially, but
just
it
to
really
be clear, Lisa, he's been given explain what he's been diagnosed as. If you can.
He's been diagnosed with autism, with the doctors do recognise that there's been an environmental issue attached to his loss of certain motor functions and the neurological effect of that, with pre-existing autism before that. It was like it took his autistic symptoms or expressions to the extreme. What happened?
So, Lisa, basically, he was able to do what in his session? The three of us, what did he do?
He was able by the end of the session to speak to Janetta and to access his understanding of himself in a more effective way than he's ever been able to. And to accept himself, to accept the benefits of, one of his biggest things, like me, is, for me, as it was, not being able to readily connect with his brain between what he says and what he thinks, or even to access what he thinks in some moments. And his shame and embarrassment at not being able to express himself made it harder for him to speak. And in understanding the benefits of taking greater time to think about what he wanted to say, it's actually made the time that it takes for him to say it reduce. His, the speed at which his brain accesses information and then is able to verbalise it has greatly improved.
And he's only had 4 sessions, so I think that's the big thing. Even with you, as we finish off with you, Lisa, is that when I first met Lisa, I would ask her one of the Epiphany questions, and sometimes it would take her 5 minutes to answer me, because connecting her brain to all that, it was just not there. And you can hear now when asking a question to Lisa, there's almost an instant answer. That's huge, and kudos to you, Lisa. It's really huge. And now you've passed the gift on to Ethan as well. So wow, well done. Really very special. So we've also got Bella in Brooklyn. Okay. So Bella,
can you see me?
yes.
Well, hi everybody. My name is Bella, and I basically originally I'm from Russia, but I immigrated into the United States in 2000. Everything seemed to be pretty normal and in some ways perfect because I grew up without a father and I had a good husband, loving, caring, and I was planning to have a family. And then one misfortune started happening after another. I had one ectopic pregnancy, then second ectopic pregnancy. While I was recovering, we found out that my late husband had cancer. And it's been over 10 years. We were fighting with cancer and I was trying to get pregnant, and then eventually it happened for me. But when I gave birth and my daughter was only 2 months old, we found out that his cancer spread and he pretty much had a few months to a year to live. So when I met Jeanette, I was really in a dark place. I could not function. It felt like somebody pulled the rug out of my feet, and I didn't know where to go. I felt completely lost. And this process helped me tremendously just to see the balance, just to move on in life. I had so many charges in many directions against other people and basically couldn't see my own faults. So this process helped me unblock myself. And I remember first session with Janetta, she couldn't get through to me no matter what. So she basically finished the session saying, you just write it out on the list. I was talking about how strong I am and how other people are weak. So when she asked me a question, what my weaknesses are, I could absolutely not find one single weakness. So she had to let me get offline, and she told me, write it out and then send it to me in the email. And within a few hours, something clicked in my brain. I started realizing how distorted I was. I got very interested in the process. So not only I did multiple sessions with Janetta, I learned the process for myself and I qualified as a consultant. And my 5-year-old daughter actually recently had another session with Janetta. So I'm very, very grateful that I was able to meet her.
Thanks, Bella. In fact, that's another landmark. I've always said I can do 7-year-olds and older. And usually the 7-year-olds are finishing my questions before I've said them, or they're answering before I finished asking, because they really get this process just so easily. And when we worked with Alice, who is only 5, she was there, she was answering, she was offering, yeah, I get it. So that was very inspiring to be able to see we can go down as young as 5 for this process. It just,
yeah, but don't forget that my girl, she always says I'm 5, but I feel like I'm 18. she's a big mouth girl.
yeah, but still, she really,
I know.
the
She processed beautifully, yes.
I mean, the reason why she was online is because she's 5 going on for 18. Let's face it, that's why she was there, because there's so much conflict. So it was good. It was really good. Okay.
Plus the trauma she also had to deal with, it's still there. And eventually I definitely want you to process her on that. Now it's too hard for her to speak about it. When I mention something or she mentions something, I ask if she wants to see video of her late father or photo, she says no. So I know it's too painful. So I know the time will come where you're gonna help her work through that.
Absolutely. There's always that divine timing. So
yep.
Okay. Thank you, team. Wonderful to have you to share. I'm going to now go into an overview of, first of all, what the process isn't. Because a lot of people think that it's this, that, and the other, and this is what it isn't. First of all, it isn't a quick fix so that one feels good for a little while, or it's a quick fix where you're guaranteed that nothing will bother you again, or that whatever's going on around you won't be so big in your life. It's not that. What it is a set of extremely accurate and powerful tools that enable you to address whatever you're dealing with at any moment in time in your life. And that which you've already addressed consciously, and of course the process carries on working unconsciously, which is why it's so amazing. But that which you've addressed consciously is easier to process. But the stuff that's suppressed and hidden deep down inside you, it will come up from time to time in the extreme. And we all get blindsided with it. I still do. I've worked the process for 14 years now. And most of the time, I can bring things into centered management. And then a big whammy. I've just been through a very big whammy in my life. Very, very big one. And processing that with this didn't make it less painful. We call it mental and emotional gym. It didn't make it less painful. It just meant I had the tools with which to do it. And instead of it taking weeks, months, years to get through, I was more able to skillfully bring it into open-hearted centered management. And then the process enabled me to create a path of solution. So that is what the big thing is it's not about going into euphoria and feeling like you're going to be on fluffy flat clouds and that you've got to keep on doing the process to stay upbeat and fluffy and positive and feeling okay. It isn't that. What it does is it brings you into a place of a great amount of acceptance, complete acceptance, appreciation, that grace, spontaneous love, and it just happens naturally in a nanosecond. And it's in that place that you're not extremely happy or extremely sad. You've got both happiness and sadness in a place where you're managing them and your heart opens. It's the most amazing thing that happens. But most of all, most importantly, it isn't therapy. People think it's therapy. Yes, I've got rooms in Harley Street and whatever, but it isn't therapy. It's transformation. It's being able to take these really amazing skills and transform yourself again and again and again. And that which you've already worked on, it's like riding a bicycle, you won't need to do it again. It's done. You don't have to keep on going back and revisiting the stuff you've worked on. Once you've worked on it, it's over. It doesn't need revisiting. So how is this the science of yin and yang? Because that's basically how this process works. And as I mentioned earlier, in a sense, it's spirituality and science talking to each other, which is a first. It hasn't happened very often. It's happening more and more, but this does it directly. Because when we're working the Epiphany process, we use it in the application of understanding the cycles of energy. Everything is circular in our lives, whether it's the noise coming out my mouth now in decibels of cycles, or the weather or female cycles, or the electricity that's lighting us and creating this forum tonight. It all works in cycles. And if you study a cycle as a scientist, you'll see that all cycles require equal amount of positive and negative charge for them to operate. You can't have one. You try and take a negativity out of electricity and you'll see how disempowered that whatever it is you're using is just not going to work. And the same applies to our psyche. But what happened was in 1952, a man called Norman Vincent Peale wrote a book called The Power of Positive Thinking. And in that book, he advocated that the way to be wealthy and happy and wise and healthy was to cut out all negativity in your life and only be positive. Now, if you take the cycle we're talking about, you can see now why that doesn't work. Really doesn't work. Because you need both in your life. Being positive and negative is human. There are nearly 5,000 human traits listed in the dictionary, and approximately half are positive and half are negative. If you try and be only positive, what happens is that you elongate and distort that cycle of consciousness on that particular charge you have about something or someone. And off you go. You're trying to be all positive about it, kind, gentle, thoughtful, loving, giving, peaceful. and you're eliminating all its opposites, you're now elongating that cycle. It's not in short, sharp bursts of a manageable cycle. Imagine in the middle of that cycle, there's a line of balance. So now each time you're going to the positive, let's say this is the positive side, you're elongating that cycle. So it's doing this. When you're over here, we call this being in a place of fantasy and pride that you've got yourself right and you're model citizen number one, and now you're loved and lovable because you're being ultra positive. But because your innate wisdom knows that that is out of balance, your unconscious consciousness catapults you or roller coasters you over to the equal and opposite side, which is the balance. So for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So off you go to this other side. Now you're in extreme negativity in a place of nightmare. Life feels nightmarish. And there you're beating yourself up from a place of guilt and shame that you haven't met these standards. When you use the Epiphany process questions, you learn to reverse that, because what happens is if you try and be more one side of the continuum than the other, the more it polarizes from that center line of balance or manageable balance. And the more polarized you make it, the more bipolar it becomes. So when you learn how to reverse those polarities and bring those charges into center, it's like magnets. Instead of the magnets doing this, they're doing that in short, sharp bursts in your conscious consciousness and your unconscious consciousness. And it's doing that. And on that line of balance, in that circle, you create two small half circles in the shape of the figure S. Bring that cycle in. And at the top of that S, you have an epiphany moment. It's the most amazing thing. So I'm drawing the scientific diagram for you in the theater of your mind right now. But in basic terms, the moment you start asking yourself balancing questions that allow you to understand where there is value in being negative as much as there is disservice, and there is disservice in being positive as much as there is value in being positive. The moment you do that, then you are the one that's managing that charge. So basically, that's how the cycle works. As I say, it's a set of questions. We use 7 life areas. We use spiritual, which is faith and trust in self and others and circumstances, or the loss of it. Mental skills, techniques, experience and exposure. Physical, as well, physical body as well as your physical world outside you, within the social side of your life, the familial side of your life, the financial side of your life. Even when I'm working with people with the greatest loss, maybe they've lost a very close loved one, I still bring in the financial side and the vocation side, because all areas of our lives get impacted no matter what you're doing. And when you start shifting yourself on all those levels, everything shifts as well. Now I'm going to open up to whoever would like to either get clarity or ask a question. Is there anybody who would like to come on and ask anything? Colleen, are you wanting to speak?
Nobody.
Hang on.
Okay.
I don't know. I still, I really struggle with this. And when we first, the one time we have physically met.
In Tanzania, yes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I know what an epiphany is, but I don't know, maybe it's easy for some people to physically be able to pinpoint, but I guess that's what I stumble on, because I'm like, a lot of what you say makes sense. But then other parts of mine are like, oh, hogwash, you know, this is just like, you know, it's like an epiphany is when you, like you said, an aha moment where you're like, wow. And I guess as you said, everyone's different. So
Okay. This
there's
is
not really a magic formula. And how do you tell that somebody is not whatever so that they get to a bipolar? It's, I mean, I've heard some fantastic stories and you do a great job, but it's, maybe I'm just relating it to myself and I can't see it.
Yes. In fact, I'm calling you out major times, sweetheart. And I'm calling you out because you don't realize the story you're running. And I'll explain in a nutshell what it is that happens. Remember I mentioned just now a 5-year-old, 7-year-old is answering these questions like that. But the older we get, the more we get attached to our stories, and the more we either get attached to overthinking and suppressing our feelings, or overfeeling and suppressing our thoughts. Or we go roller coastering between excessive thoughts and excessive feelings. And the older one is, the more difficult it is to do this process, because we've got stuck in our ways. So I've always said, the younger the person, the more easily they get it. So that's the first thing. And I certainly don't want to label you there. But here's the other part that really makes the process work. There are 2 types of clients that either work with this process or don't. And the first client is the one that's comfortable being uncomfortable. And then there's the one that's uncomfortable being uncomfortable. Now, when you're dancing a dance, because I always call people our age, you're my age, Colleen, we dance these dances and we get very attached to our stories and our coping mechanisms because they make us feel safe. So the moment a process steps in and starts showing you that it's time to let go of the dance and the coping mechanism, and I'm generalizing because I am dealing with quite a few people at the moment our age, men and women, but generally people our age will shut down and say, I can't do this, I don't understand it. And it depends how deep the pain is. So if I've got somebody, by way of example, in a terrorist attack, they'll do anything to get through that pain because the pain's got too much. That's the uncomfortable being uncomfortable. But if there's parts of the pain that the person is experiencing that's serving them, even though it isn't, they're not going to find it easy to work the process. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
But then what if you get people who are happy being uncomfortable? I don't mind being uncomfortable. I remember when we met, actually, I think I frustrated you a lot because I kept asking exactly the same questions.
Yeah, no, you didn't frustrate me.
So I don't really want this to be about me. I'm just trying to ask the same question.
Well, this is why I'm very glad you're on the call tonight, because you see, you are the balance on this call. We've had a string of people going, wow, this is really working, and what. The balance is that it doesn't work for everybody. And I actually know who will and who won't. So after a session with somebody, they think they're interviewing me and the process, which they are, very specially, but what they don't realize is that I'm interviewing them. And if they're ready for this process and their pain points are high enough, and I always say when they're sitting there saying, I can't take another fucking moment of being like this, not another moment, they're my client. Because they're prepared to let go of the old patterns and coping mechanisms that have kept them feeling safe, but at the same time very unsafe. So that's basically that in a nutshell. And thank you so much for coming forward Pauline, because it's valuable. Thank you. Anybody else want to ask or add?
Janelle, can I add?
Yes.
So when you were talking about the 5-year-old and then when we get elder, why your kid will get it better than adults and elderlies. In psychology, they call the false self. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
The true self and there's the false self. The false self is the person, the person that we build ourselves to believe that we are, and we do that as coping mechanisms. So the elder you become, your story is not anymore a story that you're running. You believe that is actually the truth. Yeah. And so it's kind of acting. It's a way of protection that that we, and so it's very true. Like the resistance will get harder as the years go by.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's easier work to do younger people, and I love it. And of course, no surprise, I do really well with teenagers and late teenagers, because after all, I came across this process in losing a teenager to suicide. But for me, when there are breakthroughs with people my age, which is happening more and more now, I've got quite a few people on my books right now who are around about my age, who are having incredible insight, and my heart really opens with that, because that means that the process is being applied more and more effectively, and it's just amazing when that happens. So thank you for that, Toya, for that input.
Can I come in here?
Yes, hi, Miles, yes.
Yeah, I understand a lot of what you're saying, but you've known me for about 50 years, and you were a tiny little girl, at junior school, I think, in those days. And yes, you met me when I had just been through a bit of a tough time, but that tough time, as you say, built my character. I went through a time when they wanted to take my leg off. I was 4 months in hospital, and I refused, my mother refused, and then they told me it would be only a matter of time. But I decided that I wasn't going to give up. And we go through a process, and that actually built me. I was a shy little boy before that incident. I didn't say boo to a goose unless I was angry, which I was a lot of the time. And I went through that process, and I came out realizing that I had lots of friends. Before that accident, I didn't think I had any friends. And then I suddenly realized I had friends, I had value. But then I put a lot of my efforts into work, and I moved countries, etc. And I just applied myself to work, and my anger came out like Jenny at work. I progressed. I did many things other people said were impossible. But that's my life. I've done many things that people said were impossible. But each time I came across a tough time, like when I got home one day to find my wife and kids had gone, I searched the hospitals, the police stations. I went round everywhere I could, and I got back home eventually at 10 o'clock to get a phone call to say that she'd left me and gone to live with her brother-in-law, and I would not see the kids again. I cracked, but that also built me. That built me into a better, stronger person. It changed the way I reacted to things.
Miles, thank you for sharing that, because that's exactly the essence of this, is being able to find the hidden gift in one's adversity. And it is the adversity that defines us and softens us and helps us to understand the other side of what we were blocked and distorted from seeing before. So it's exactly that. And the beauty of that, and being able to take this process and do it on many, many levels, not just crisis levels, being able to do it on day-to-day triggers, on day-to-day challenges, and every thought, word and deed that you do to be able to do this. I mentioned earlier that this process becomes your daily mental and emotional gym, so that you're not just defined by your crisis. You become a living part of what you're doing, and life becomes manageable, and everything you start working with starts opening up in the most appreciative ways. And then when parts of your unconscious consciousness is allowed to come up with this, then you've got the tools to deal with the next crisis, because we do have challenges that happen in our lives throughout, either directly or around us with our loved ones. And this is another thing I wanted to share with you. I always call it the toddler falling down. When you try and be perfectly in balance all the time and never have a wobbly in extreme, then you're back to judging yourself. Sometimes it's necessary to be the toddler that falls off the edge of the world and falls down. How does a toddler learn to balance? By standing up and then falling over again, which is the exact opposite to balancing. So it's about being able to allow yourself to go to the extremes and not try and always be in center of manageability. So that's one thing. Also, when you go around with the mantra saying, I'm not allowed to be this, and I'm not allowed to be that, and I'm not allowed to be the other, I use the toddler there as well and say, when you say to a toddler, you see that corner over there, that corner, you're so not allowed to go there. Guess where they go? It's like a magnet. They're there. What? What's there? What's in the corner? Why can't we go there? Let me have a look. So what this process does is it enables you to go to that corner safely with very good tools, without judgment. Because the moment we're told we cannot be negative, guess where we start going? It's like, can't help it. I'm trying to be positive. I'm trying to be positive. Oh my God, I feel negative. So this process enables you to do that from the micro side of your life right through to the macro side of your life. So every facet of your life can have it being applied to. And then the last thing I wanted to explain in this part is that there are times where I go, fuck the process. And that's important too, because if I'm always going, oh, this is happening over here, do the process, do the process, do the process. There are times where I can feel I can no more do this process than put a hole in my head. So when that happens, I call this allowing and wallowing. I allow myself to say all the things that I'm feeling. I don't process it. I just go, I'm feeling shit, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling vulnerable, I'm feeling this and that and the other, and I list it all, and I even allow myself to feel down, and I remain in down. I allow down, I give down permission. And then there's a subtle point where you can feel you clicked over from allowing what you're feeling into wallowing. And the moment I click into wallowing, I know it's time to do the process. So I wanted to share that with you too as well. We have one or two people online here who are not our co-presenters, but have also worked beautifully. It's just so special to see you here. Welcome. You know, we've got Moira, who's, wow, she's done so well with this process. And Bobby, you're here as well. Gee, it's just wonderful to have you here. So I just wanted to give you a shout out and a welcome as well. It's so special.
Netta, can I complete what you just said?
Yes.
And one beautiful thing about the process, and is exactly about what you shared, is that everything serves in life.
Yes.
The good and the bad. and allowing to not say shit to the process and allowing to say yes to the process. I think that's a beautiful thing to say about the Epiphany, because we talk about things that are really intense, but everything serves. To process serves, and to not process serves. So
I think that's what you've said is spot on. What you learn with the process is there's no judgment. There's no have to, got to, must to, ought to, should do, have to. That peels away. There's choice. All you realize is there's open-hearted choice, and it's natural. It's not contrived. It just happens naturally. So, good point. Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you, team, for sharing your stories. If you feel that the time to no longer live a life from one side to the other and not sure how to handle it when you do deal with difficult situations, from day-to-day challenges right through to when big things happen in your life, and if you're ready to start living a new way of living that starts new internal conversations where your thoughts and your feelings start talking to each other powerfully instead of contradicting each other. If you're ready to do that, then I invite you to come and join me online and have a session with me and see where this takes you. And I just want to thank you all and goodbye to you all, and I look forward to working more with whoever is in that space and place to move forward and live a life in their true wisdom and genius. Thank you for joining me. Love you all, and speak to you again soon.